Shir Kali Parshas Vayietze.
So we're turning to Parshas Vayietze, chapter Lamed Aleph. Pasuk Yud Zayin and the Psukim after that. Particularly the Pasuk Yud Tes, chapter Lamed Aleph, 31, Pasuk 17 to 19. So we see that after 20 years in Beis Lovan, Yankim Vino gains a special instruction from heaven that he should return home. He's already completed his time with the many years of tremendous nisyonos that he had, trials that he had in the house of Lavan. Now it's come time that says that he must go back to Eretz HaKodesh and join his father Yitzchak, etc. So it comes along, so there's a whole series of inyanim how Yankov discusses it with his with his family, with his two wives and the children, and he tells them of a dream that he had, and everything is ready for them to begin their departure. The only thing is that he hasn't actually, as you might say, discussed it or taken permission from the boss of the whole situation, who was Lavan Hoarami. So therefore, when it comes to the moment of departure, we see it takes place in the form of a fee that Yankov gets everything together, and he departs in a way that Lavan doesn't know at that moment that he's going. And so the pasuk says, Vayokom Yankov got up, Vayisor es Bonov es Noshov ala Gemalim. Yankov stood up, and he carried his children and his wives on the camels. Vayinhag es kol miknehu. He took all of his possession, es kol ruchushay, all the things that he'd gained. Asher rochash miknei kinyona asher rochash bepadan aram. All the things that he'd taken in this area where Lavan and where he'd been staying with Lavan, which is called Padan Aram. Lovei, and the Kavanah was to come home, El Yitzchak Avinu, out of Canaan. At that particular moment, Lavan holach ligzois es toinoi. In other words, Lavan had gone to shear the sheep of his flocks, or the goats of his flocks, and it's well known that there was a distance between the flocks of Yankov and the flocks of Lavan, which are 3 days, as we know. Because earlier, the agreement reached between Lavan and Yankov was that they would separate, and they would keep their flocks separated by 3 days difference. So Lavan had gone from the central point 3 days in the direction of his flocks, in order to shear them and take the wool, etc. Vatignoi v'rochel es hatrofim asher le'aviyah. And knowing that he was not around, then Rochel imenu, she stole Vatignoi v'rochel es hatrofim. Now these trofim, we're going to see, it's quite difficult to understand exactly what they were. But the Rashi claims that they were a form of Avodah Zarah, a form of some idol worship in a small and minor way. Slicha? לא אכפת לנו באמצע לימוד עכשיו. So she stole these forms, according to Rashi. We'll see later on different opinions as to what they actually were. These forms of little idols, she stole them, even though Asher Leovio, they belonged to her father, to Lavan. And then the pasuk goes on to say that Yaakov, he didn't steal anything, but he stole literally Lavan's mind. He deceived Lavan by fleeing away. Vayignoiv Yaakov a slave Lavan orav. He literally stole Lavan's mind or his heart as he fled. In other words, Lavan wasn't anticipating at all that he would flee in such a way. So what in the middle of this whole thing is Rachel doing? Stealing these things from her father, because the pasuk says that she stole them. But that means like some form of illegal or improper way of taking somebody from the ownership of that somebody, taking something from the ownership of somebody. That what Yaakov stole, that was a deception in general. But here on the part of Rachel, a theft, right? Tignoiv Rachel, she stole these idols or whatever they were. Now we see that despite what she might have had in mind, it's a very serious matter, because later on, when Lavan wakes up that they've been gone, and then he chases them, and he had tremendous success in his chasing after them, because he caught up with them even though they'd already gone several days ahead of him. And eventually he reaches up with Yaakov, and he confronts him, and he says, what was this Indian that you fled and you left me in such an unceremonious way, and you didn't give me the chance of farewell for my children and for my grandchildren, and so on and so forth. And then he says to Yaakov at the end of the whole complaint, how come you fled from me like that? In Pasuk Lamed, he says to Yaakov, and now that you went back, all right, so you went back because you were so anxious to see your father. I understand you've been 20 years away from your home, and you had a tremendous yearning for your parents and for your father, so you went. But why did you steal my gods? Lama ganafto es Elohai. Why did you steal my God? So we see from that these things were considered by Lavan as his, he considered them divine, because he calls them my divinities. What are you doing? Stealing my divinities. So Yaakov would have been expected to say, would have been expected to say, who worries about your crazy old idol worship? Who cares about that? And we see that Yaakov says, Vayan Yaakov Vayomer Lavan. He said, because I was afraid, the reason I fled. And he gives a reason, a tale, as you might say, why he fled. And then he says in Pasuk Lamed Beis, Im asher timtzo es Elohecha. He calls them to Lavan. Yeah, your gods. If somebody will find your gods, literally, or these gods will be found by somebody in my entourage, lo yichye, that person won't live. I'll put him to, I'll see that he's put to death. That's pretty hard going. Somebody went off with some idol worship, some sort of crazy stuff, and Yaakov says, he said, anybody, whoever will be found having these things in his possession, then he will not live. So that comes along Rashi, and Rashi says a really mind-boggling thing. Rashi says that from that curse that Yaakov gave, And he said, whoever will have these things will not live. He said it was from that curse that later on Rachel passed away early in her life. But Rachel passed away, and she wasn't zeicher to come back to Eretz Yisrael with Yaakov and to be buried in the Mount of Machpelah, the whole thing. She passed away in the way, in the derech. And she wasn't even zeicher to see her second son. She passed away at the moment of giving birth to her second son, Binyamin, and she never saw him, never had any nachas from her second son, as you might say, because she passed away. Berega Ahu. So Rashi says that that curse that Yaakov Avinu gave, it came true. It came true. But it came true in the one, like he said in the curse, on his most beloved wife. That was the real wife that Yaakov Avinu considered himself as having, is well known. The ever devoted wife, and the one that he was devoted to was Rachel. And here we see, because he said such a sharp curse to Lavan, and he said, oh yeah, whoever we will find that will not live. Rashi says, no, give a look. That's why Rachel passed away in such a tragic way on her way back to Eretz Yisrael. They didn't get back to Eretz Yisrael. It was in the way that the whole thing happened. That because of Yaakov Avinu's curse, then he lost his wife. So we see that something very earnest is going on here, and the whole thing tends somewhat to center around unpleasant issue like pieces of idol worship, and they're called trophim. And according to some people, they're called trophim because there's a word in Hebrew, toref. What toref means, an unpleasant or unclean thing, and therefore they're called trophim. With tov, toref also with a tov, because they're unpleasant and things against Yiddishkeit. They're not the sort of thing that you didn't have anything to do with. So nonetheless, this terrible outcome from Rachel having taken such an action. And the Pasuk even describes it as having stolen them. So, what does it mean she stole them? I mean, these things are not really anybody's possession. They're something that they just don't really have any existence in the world. So what does it mean that she stole them? So comes along Rashi over there back in the Pasuk where we were, in Pasuk Yutes, that Lavan went out, Ligzes Toinet, he wasn't around, so she stole them, these Trophim. Rashi says, Vatiknoi Rachel es ha-Trophim, lahafrish es avio me aveda zora nishkavno. That Rachel nishkavno, she had kavon, she had in mind, her intention, as you might say, was lahafrish es avio me aveda zora. She wanted to separate her father and to stop him serving aveda zora. She wanted to move him away altogether from aveda zora. And therefore she stole these trophim. From that we see in Rashi that Rashi holds that these trophim were in effect, they were idol worship. Because we'll see in a minute there's some other opinions as to what they were. And Rashi holds that they were idol worship, and therefore she had in mind a good kavanah. She had a very good kavanah, Rachel, in taking them away from him, albeit in the form of Geneva, because he wasn't around and he wasn't able to look after his own ownership, and she took it away. But she had in mind to separate him from serving Avodah Zarah. So you might say, well, why did she do that when he was around? I mean, she grew up in the house of Lavan. These things must have been around. She's been married now to Yaakov Avinu quite a number of years, 20 years minus 7 is about 13 years. She's been married to Yaakov Avinu, and they've been around Lavan. I mean, they've been in the area of Lavan. Then why didn't she make an effort up till now? Why all of a sudden did she decide that she's going to steal these things in order to separate him from Avodah Zarah. And particularly, that once you pick up Avodah Zarah and you're a Yid, then you're not supposed to hold it. I mean, you're not supposed to carry it with you or put it into your household or into your entourage or in your package, and pack it up in your suitcase or whatever it is there. You're supposed to get rid of it. And we find that she didn't do that. She took it with her. And then we see later, Lavan was so anxious to get to these things and find them, and he really believed, and therefore Yaakov Avinu said, okay, check out and search around. I'm sure nobody from my party has taken your Avodah Zarah. Check out and find, and if you find it, then we'll put the person to death. That's what Yaakov Avinu said. So Lavan came around, and he went in all the tents. He went from one tent to the other, and he was looking for these things. And he came into the tent of Rachel, and what did she do? She took the trophies. She still had them. She took them and she put them underneath the cushion that she was sitting on, and she hid them underneath the cushion. So when your father comes in, you have to get up and stand up and say hello. And he might have just kicked the cushion out of the way, and he would find them. Then she would have really been in very big trouble, because Yaakov Avinu already said what he said. So what did she do? She gave an excuse to Lavan. And she said that for certain private reasons she's not able to stand up at that particular moment. She can't stand up to give him the cover of standing. But she greets him the way she is. And therefore he looked all around the tent. He went all over the tent, was searching. He didn't trust anybody. Didn't trust her either. He walked all around the tent looking around. He didn't find them. And he was very upset about that, very angry. But Rachel remained sitting on top of these trophim, these idols of little Avodah Zarah or whatever they are, and she's sitting on top of them. In the meantime, Lavan goes out, and he's frustrated and angry. He didn't find his Avodah Zarah. And then we see this whole discussion, etc., further discussion between Yaakov and Lavan. So, answers of the question, if they were, as Rashi said, they were Avodah Zarah, then we have a justifiable question. Why did she take them along with her, Rachel? Why did she keep them with her? And she hid them even to a very dangerous point that he was already there in the tent, and she hid them underneath the cushion on which he was sitting. I mean, she's playing with fire. She should have got rid of them. And we have if we're going to say that they're mamish Avodah Zarah, then we have a cloud by Avodah Zarah that you're not allowed to bring Avodah Zarah into your house or into your. Some people, they're not even allowed to bring it into your bag or anything like that. You have to get rid of it immediately. And it's written in the verse, Lo yisovi to'eva el beisecha. You must not bring the abomination into your home. You're not allowed to do it. So some people say, lav davki, your house, but anything which is your possession that makes it come into your ownership, you're not allowed to do this. Even to drop it into your suitcase or your bag or anything and hold it there would be going over against this prohibition not to bring the Avodah Zarah into your house. So here we see that Rachel, not only she didn't destroy it, but she carried it around with her, and it was in her bags. And when Lavan chased after them, days of traveling to catch up with them and everything, and then he makes a huge issue out of it with Yaakov Avinu. And then he goes looking, and she hides it under the cushion, etc., etc. Why didn't she destroy it immediately? And if her kavanah was to separate him, like Rashi says, from Avodah Zarah, then she had to get rid of it immediately. She said there might always be a chance that maybe he might get back at it some way or another, and then she wouldn't have achieved anything. And particularly that she's not allowed to take it into her reshus, it would seem. So therefore, we see that this whole episode seems to have far-reaching consequences, right to the very basis of Yiddishkeit, van Avodah Zarah, and then Rachel Aminu's involvement to the point that Yaakov Avinu's threat, and Yaakov Avinu's, what you might call, is they call a dramatic entrance. He for sure doesn't have any trophy window in his bag. So, we see that it's a very great, far-reaching consequences, even to the point that it brings to a keeping of Yaakov Avinu's curse to the point of Rachel Aminu's passing away from the world. I mean, that's a very tremendous issue. It was a tragic way that she passed away. So therefore, we have to be misplaining a little bit what is really going on around here. Now, if we look in the Medrash Rabbah, in the Medrash, so the Medrash backs up to what Rashi says. The Medrash Rabbah deals principally with the fact that she took the trophim, and it says that a trophim were a type of Avodah Zarah, a form of what do you call it? Things that were served. That Yaakov, that Lavan, for Arami, he used to serve them in a form of bowing down and ishtachavoyah to these idols, and therefore she wanted to separate him more or less. The lashon that Rashi brings here in his Pirush Al HaTorah, it's more or less a straight quote from that Medrash Rabbah. However, but that involves the questions that we mentioned. However, we look up in another Medrash called the Medrash Tanchuma, but that's from one of the Amoraim, Rabbi Tanchuma, and he brings down in the Medrash, he brings two Pirushim as to why she stole these trophim of two Biyurim B'Shem HaChachamim. One, what we see from the Medrash Rabbah and Rashi, that she wanted to stop her father serving Avodah Zarah. Another one is a very fascinating one, that she was concerned that Lavan would look at these things, and he would, through looking at them, he would know what is going on. In other words, the Medrash Tanchuma suggests another pirush. What does it mean, these trophim? What were they? And it appears that the Medrash Tanchuma wants to say in the second pirush that they were like a form of, not a crystal ball, but they were that type of thing, whereby you could look into these things and you could learn from them what's going to be in the future, or you could be told certain things do or don't do. It's worth doing this, not worth doing this, things of that nature. And therefore, according to that pirush, the word trafim is from a word heref, or meaning to hold back. You have to stop doing that. Haref yodecha, to sort of put your hand down, don't do, because all of a sudden they might say, listen, this is not a good hour to do what you were planning to do, or it's not worthwhile in general to do, and therefore pull your hand down, don't get involved. That's what they call trafim. So that's a kind of looking at a time measuring, but at the same time a time significant measuring type of instrument that would tell you, listen, you plan to do something this time, that's not a good time to do it, keep away, or don't do it at all, or if you intend doing it, do it bizman acher. In other words, the these inyanim knew what was happening, and they were able to sort of pick up somewhere or another what's happening in time. And therefore, says that appears in the Medrash Tanchuma, that Rachel was concerned that Lavan would look into these things, immediately got back, and he saw that Yaakov wasn't around, and he would know how much time had already passed since they left, and he might even be able to calculate where where they were and where they were going, and remember he would be able to catch up with them. And Beklal, that we find, if you notice the whole way through, Lavan was a very tricky cookie. In other words, he was a man of all sorts of knowledge of how to, to dray things and to get things his way, etc., etc. And therefore, it's put down in the Medrash that he was a big sorcerer, a general. So he might be able to use these things to know what was happening with them and to locate their way and their derech. Therefore, they wanted to make as much distance between themselves and him as they could. And therefore, she stole these things. Now, according to that pshat, it's not mamish avodah zarah in Lafizeh. If we learn pure as that, but it is a forbidden thing in the Torah. You're not allowed to use things to tell you times to do things or not to do them. This is well known later on in the psukim of the Torah. But it's not mamish avodah zarah, but it's a form of improper usage of things which tell you what's going to happen in the future, v'chulu, v'chulu, or what's a good time, what's not a good time, what's a bad time. So therefore, according to that, she stole them in order to avoid trouble with Lavan as much as is possible. So that would also be maybe easier to answer why she didn't destroy them, why she kept them the whole time, because there wasn't anything really avodah zarah in them, but it was improper thing to have around. But she, because of the hurry or because of other calculations, she didn't see any reason to destroy them. But that pshat becomes a little bit difficult because later on we see careful straight away that when he gets there, Lavan's so upset about having lost these instruments that he says to Yaakov, Loma Gonaftes Elokai, why did you take my gods? And then later Yaakov says to him, whoever's pinched your gods, he's not going to live. And he also used the expression God. So from that it would appear that Lavan held that they were like a form of, didn't he? Right? He held that they were a form of divinity of some sort, because that's the use of the word. The word Elohim tends to imply that al derech harov. Elohim implies that b'derech klal in the psukim of the Torah. So from that it would appear that there were. However, we find that certainly the great Meforshim, in order to avoid a whole problem with the avodah zarah, they prefer that period. And they say that what she did was she took this away, be'ikah, to protect herself and Yankee, and to make as much distance in their fleeing until Lavan would wake up where they'd gone and how they'd gone, to get as far away as possible, and to avoid him using them to, as it were, locate their path or where they were, etc., etc. Now, one of the leaders of this general approach is the Ramban. Now, the Ramban comes along and he says that it's very hard to say that this was a form of avodah zarah. And he's got a very fascinating term why he says that he doesn't want to say that these things were, mamish, how do you call it, idols, mamish avodah zarah. And he says, right at the beginning of his Pirush Ramban, he said, because if they were avodah zarah, then how, he said, do we find in the household of our leader and king, David, of all the kings, how do we find avodah zarah? Question mark, exclamation mark. So everybody wonders, what does he mean by that? So he just hints at it because he assumes, he doesn't write about it in great detail, he just assumes that you know what he's referring to. But I don't know if everybody here does, so we'll just tell you briefly what is he referring to. You know very well that King Shaul, he was the first king over Yidden, Shaul HaMelech, and David HaMelech was his son-in-law, very close to him at the beginning. But then, unfortunately, Shaul HaMelech developed a feeling, even though it wasn't right, that David HaMelech was rebelling against him, trying to take his kingship from him. And therefore he turned very severely against David HaMelech, wanted to try and take his life. And there's a whole series of attempts on the part of Shaul HaMelech to take David's life. And he sent his soldiers and his armies to look for David HaMelech and try and locate him. And David spent a lot of his time fleeing and hiding and avoiding the attempts of capture on the part of Shaul HaMelech. So one of the first times that Shaul HaMelech sent a whole group of soldiers to get David and bring him back and put him publicly to death, what happened was they came to David's house and they surrounded they surrounded the house, or I don't know if they surrounded it, maybe that's not correct, but they waited outside the house, and Shaul HaMelech said that they shouldn't, for some reason, that's another thing that demands biur, they shouldn't take him at night time. They should only take him out of the house in the morning and bring him straight to him, and then they would. So what they were supposed to do was to guard the house at night, but not to actually capture David HaMelech during that time. So now the daughter of Shaul, who was Michal Bas Shaul, she was David's wife. So she said, you know what, my dear, she said to David, all these people are out there, you know, they're all come to take you away and to put you to death. So she let him out through a window at the back of the house. Now, that would tend to indicate that these Shomrim were so sure of what they were doing that they never surrounded the whole house or every corner of it. They're mostly towards the front. And somehow or another, David HaMelech got out the back window and he disappeared, didn't he? Yeah. I beg your pardon, my sir? Yeah. Yes, he did. Yeah. If you sit forward but not lean right over to save it, and Be'ez Hashem will help you. That's a good time. Won't it? So, Michal Bas Shaul, she's worried that Bechol Zot, what are these fellas going to do? They're going to send in, aren't they? They're going to send in people from outside every now and then to check what's with David HaMelech. So they want to see him sleeping in the bed, and then they'll know that everything's all right. But what did she do? It's written that she took es ha-trafim, exactly the same word, es ha-trafim, without an explanation what it is, and she put it in the bed where David HaMelech was, and then she took some goat skin things, similar to what happened with Yahu, she took some goat skins, because these trafim apparently don't have hair, according to some of the portion there, and so she took a sort of a goat skin with some hair, and that was like at the top underneath, sticking out from under the sheet or whatever, and so it looked like there was a man in there with hair, and that's what she did. So should they come in, they would think that, oddly enough, in such a situation, maybe he took some heavy sleeping pills or something, but oddly enough, in such a situation, he was sleeping. That they would see him in the bed and they wouldn't go chasing after him, because she really let him out and assisted his escape. So it's written this word, trafim, that's what they call it. So it comes along the Ramban, and the Ramban says that they can't possibly say that the trafim are Avodah Zarah. I mean, how as if they're Avodah Zarah? What were they doing in the household of Michal Bas Shaul and David HaMelech? She had them there right on the spot. She took them and put them in the bed. What are you doing? How's it? So the Ramban's got a very good point that if the Trafim are Avodah Zarah, what are they doing in David HaMelech's? What are they doing in David HaMelech's house? And therefore says the Ramban, the Pirush B'Shem, the Medrash Tanchuma, do we have to say that they were like time-telling things, you know, and the way you could look, you can know hours, you can know different things, and this. And it could be that, you know, people had these things in their house, you know, to sort of, know what's happening, what's going on in the latest, and what's the time. Also, it's a little peculiar, but nonetheless, that's what the Ramban wants to tain. And he wants to say that we find that there are certain things which basically are good and even acceptable, but later people treat them the wrong way. And he said there are certain words in certain of the Nevi'im, the Latin Nevi'im, that they really go against trafim. Once again, they're mentioned in at least two of the Latin Nevi'im as being unpleasant things and improper things, which apply to their Avodah Zarah. So the Ramban says that we find sometimes that good things in the world, people take them wrong and they turn them eventually, Rachmanin Islam, into Avodah into Avodah Zarah. But the way they were in David's house, they weren't Avodah Zarah. They were just a way of knowing the time and maybe having some knowledge of what's going to happen in the future. So that becomes a little strange. She put a little instrument for telling time or something inside the bed. That looks like a man. She puts goat skins on top of it. It's a funny little man inside the bed. I mean, what sort of a tzura, what sort of a shape would that have? Nonetheless, that's what the Ramban said. So come along to Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra, he says another possibility that maybe they were quite big, these trofim, quite sizable, and it was possible. So if you really knew a lot of high things, like nowadays you call practical Kabbalah, very few people are into that, so those who know high madrigas in Kabbalah, and you use it slightly improperly, that you could sort of bring down all sorts of, hashpurs from heaven through these things. So therefore, Michal Bashol, she was able to make it look, like a man in the bed, because she was mamshi. Maybe that's the kavanah of the Ibn Ezra. Anyway, a lot of people say, wait a minute, it's getting a bit far to say a thing like that. But anyway, whatever, on that basis, the Ramban wants to taina that really the trofim are not Avodah Zarah. They're okay. It's just that later, when people misused them, they became Avodah Zarah. And the kasha is from what occurred with David HaMelech and his wondrous escape through the assistance of these trofim in a very strange way by putting them inside David HaMelech's bed. So therefore, the plot thickens, as to what really are these trofim. So we see that comes along the Medrash over there in the Medrash Tanchuma, and certain of the great Rishonim bring it. Rashi actually brings it in another place. It's not one of his Pirushim Mamish on the map. In another sefer that Rashi wrote, he mentions over there that according to those old that was Avodah Zarah, these trofim, that was really quite, how to call it, quite mind-boggling and horrific as to how they actually served this Avodah Zarah. That they took somebody and killed him. They took a man and killed him at the beginning, and he was supposed to be a bechor, a firstborn. And they did all sorts of weird things to his body, and they salted it, and they did all sorts of horrific things. It's all written in the Medrash. This is what they did. And then they took certain pieces of gold metal or other precious metals, and they made sorcery on them, and they put it in the mouth of this dead person, and then they would stand him up in a certain place, or according to other, they would cut off the head, and just put the head up. But there are differing opinions about that. And then you could talk to this, and it would talk back at you through this metal thing in the mouth of this head. It would talk back at you. Or you could even bow down to it. You could even, bow, and then you would get even better results if you knew what you were doing by bowing down to it. Rashi brings it in another sefer. So that backs up the opinion that Rashi brings, that this was really Avodah Zarah. Then the kasha from the Ramban of what's it doing in the house of David HaMelech becomes really a strong kasha. So we have to say that two different types of trofim are different. According to Rashi, we'd have to say that that's one sort of trofim, and over there in the house of David HaMelech, you have to find another explanation. What was it? How did it function? What was it doing in the house of David HaMelech, etc., etc. According to Rashi, this was mamish a form of Avodah Zarah in a very weird and almost mind-boggling sort of way. And Lovan Aram, he was into these type of things. That was, as you might say, that was up his alley, it was up his street. He was into this type of thing. Lovan Aram. However, comes along the Maharal Miprag. The Maharal Miprag says to the Ramban, that the Ramban says that the thing was really just a way of knowing hours and all that type of thing. So he tinus against the Ramban. He said, but look, sof kol sof, we have to say no matter what it was originally, that Lavan mistreated it in a way that you're not supposed to do, because he later says twice, or the Torah says in his name, my gods. In other words, he doesn't just say a thing that I used, it's very precious to me, how come you take from my household? He said, you stole my divinity. So from that it appears that no matter what it may have been, Lavan, he served it. And if a goy mamish bows down to something, then he turns it into a Avodah Zarah. Even though it may not be the normal types of Avodah Zarah which were present in the world at that time, or if a goy bows down to them, then he makes it into a Avodah Zarah. And so if he bowed down to it, so what's the nafkamina? If it was beduk this, or it was beduk something else, it was a Avodah Zarah. That's what the Maral Miprag, that's what he tinus against the Ramban. And he said, so it might have been something that originally it was for hours, and for knowing times, and this is a good time, this is not such a good time, which is also questionable, al Torah. But since Lavan actually bowed down to it, and he made a whole asik of Avodah Zarah, and he called it Elohah, he said, therefore, Ein Marasot, it's Avodah Zarah. Ayat say, come to us that Rashi's on the right road, that it was Kach Avodah Zarah. If that's the case, if it was Avodah Zarah, then what was she doing, taking it away from her father? Albeit she had the best in mind, but she took it away and held it and carried it with her and kept it under her cushion with the guns and doing. L'chera says the Ramban immediately, she was mechuyav immediately to get rid of it. Why didn't she destroy it or throw it in the river? There's a din that you can throw Avodah Zarah into the river, and that's called destroying it. So why didn't she do that? Why did she take it? And so the Maral Miprag, I look carefully in his words, the Maral Miprag asked that kasha, and he said she was herself now, or even of taking Avodah Zarah into your house. She took it with her. She's now over them. That particular Issa. So it says to the Maral Miprag a very fascinating thing. And with the Miti answers certain kashiyas that other great Meforshim asked, and the Maral Miprag says, but since she really meant ultimately to destroy it, and her purpose was to be, destroying Avodah Zarah from the world. If she took it into her house, then she's not going against any prohibition with that, because if you take Avodah Zarah into the house intending to destroy it, then you're not having any benefit, or you're in any way not admitting to it. You're just taking it into your house until such time that you work out how to destroy it. Either you'll light it up with kerosene, or you'll blow it up with a piece of gunpowder, or what you're going to do. Yeah, but until you actually do so, since you intend destroying it, then you haven't been over any issue of the cloud. So some people want to say, why is it Vayietze that she stole it? Stole it means it really belongs to him. And so of course she stole it. So also some people want to say, well, since he couldn't really have an oil from it, it's not really just stole it, and she didn't mean to have an oil from it, therefore she didn't really steal it. All sorts of different pirushim which are given. Of a so the Torah says Vayietze that she did steal it. It's not. In other words, she took it in the form of a stealing, at least the Gabi him. She took it in the form of stealing, because he didn't know, and all of a sudden he comes and he finds it's not there, and he spent a lot of energy trying to locate it and to look after it. So in a way, at least in a spiritual nature, or maybe not in a purely monetary nature, she had a form of Geneva here, stole it from him. So, says that the Maral Miprag, she should have immediately got rid of it. Why didn't she do that? And some of the other great Meforshim sort of asked that question in a slightly hesitating voice, because they don't have a clear answer to that. So to Maral Miprag, and he says no, that if she would have destroyed it immediately, and thrown it into the river, or blown it up with a piece of gunpowder or something, then they could have been in trouble. Why could they have been in trouble? Because he was a very big, sorcerer, Lavan, and he might have felt that something had happened to this, and therefore he would come along and he would stop them in the way, and he'd say, "Listen here, what happened to my? Why did you steal? But what happened to my Avodah Zarah. What did you guys do with it? And until you guys find it, or make me another one, or who knows what, you're not moving from here. But if we'll say that the whole thing was a theft, and they can't find the thief, and they can't find the stolen thing, then there's no reason for him to hold them up, and to prevent their further progress. And therefore, that's what the Maral Price said, that Rachel, because she was so concerned to keep everything moving, that they should get away from this whole place, is she took it with her, because she was frightened he might work out somewhere or another that it had been destroyed, and then he would make big trouble. But eventually, of course, her purpose was to destroy it. She had really no Indian to hold it. Once they would get free and they would get out of Lavan's area, then of course she would take steps to see that it be destroyed. It's only the shaila that occurs from the other side. Why didn't she take it away from him? They were there for all these years with Lavan. Why is it that she took it at this moment when they were fleeing from him? Why didn't she do something about it the whole time she was there? Now, I must admit, I haven't found that question openly in the Meforshim, but I haven't been able to look at all the Meforshim. But it seems to me that we could suggest that as long as they were there, then Rachel, even though she grew up in the house of a guy like Lavan, but nonetheless, once she was strengthened by the presence of her great husband, Yaakov, then they used their influence on Lavan, and all the time, whenever they had contact with him, they were trying to work on him that he should get away from these things and forget, and maybe they kept him to a certain extent on low key in reference to these inyanim. Her concern was, now that we're fleeing, and we're fleeing means that we're fleeing in a way that he doesn't want us to go, and he's going to object to that. If we flee and we get out of his life, he's going to be annoyed. He'll go back dafki to the Avodah Zarah, and he'll fall into it in such a way that he'll sort of deliberately want to serve Avodah Zarah, maybe, or all upon him, go back to his old bad habits that they maybe through some way kept him at least away from it a bit. And as far as she was concerned that he shouldn't fall mamish back into Avodah Zarah in a simple sense, and therefore she took it now. And she didn't try to destroy it or whatever from before. She took it now. However, we find a very amazing thing that occurs later on not later on, I mean it's a thing which occurs in the Lefise, we could say that really it was Avodah Zarah, according to Rashi, and that's what most of the indications tend to show, that it was really Avodah Zarah, despite the time of the Ramban, from the simple usage of Lavan himself, of his language later on. And therefore, says Rashi, the Ika, and Rashi says very briefly, that she was busy here in a mitzvah. She wanted to take away Avodah Zarah from those who serve it, and she had reasons for not having done that up till now. She had her reasons for keeping it with her, and Rachel Imenu had a perfect kavanah to be mevatel the Indian of Avodah Zarah from its service. So in that light, it finds itself very, very difficult to understand that immediately when he catches up with them and he tells Yaakov what was going on, Yaakov says, whoever did that, and then he uses a very strong language, he won't live, and boom. So if we look it up in the Medrash, we find over there that the Medrash says that you've got to be tremendously careful what you say. I mean, I think that's a general rule. But what you say in the form of what might be like a curse or a negative something towards other people, and the more you become developed in life, the more you become shy to spiritual things, the more you've got to be careful of that. And therefore the Medrash brings a pasuk in Koheles, and it says that this was like, this could be compared to a king or a ruler over a country who has a plate that's pear. In Hebrew you say, like he let something out of his mouth, and it's not a pleasant thing. He's the ruler and he's the king, and once he said it, that he can't take it back, because whatever he says goes. That's like it's written by Achashverosh, over there. After the whole thing, when they hung home and when they're going to do it, so then Esther and Mordechai say to Achashverosh, "No, let's get going now. Let's be mevatel the whole gezerah." And Achashverosh says, "Look, I'm terribly sorry. I wrote a decree, and once I've said a decree, I can't take it back." And so they had to work all sorts of ideas as to how would they be mevatel the whole decree. And so the only answer that they found was Achashverosh said, "I'll give a new decree that the Yidden can make war against their enemies. The Yidden can defend themselves, and they can make a war against them." And that was the whole answer that they came up with. Because once the king has said something, it's gone out. So therefore, the letter says that that's what happened with Yaakov. Had he known, and therefore the pasuk says, Yaakov lo yoda ki Rachel genavacham. Had he known, he wouldn't have said those words, maybe. But once he'd already done it, so that the letter says that's a pasuk in Koheles kishkogogo hayetze or yotze mipi hashalit. That the ruler gives out even a non-intending word, but once he's given it out, he's the ruler. The whole country is dependent on him. That's a very mind-boggling thing. And the Gemara brings a few examples of that. There's several places in the Gemara where it's brought down that certain great chachamim just almost sort of by the way, they said unpleasant things, and then later it came about, and people were affected very seriously by these inyanim. And the Gemara says that that's kishkoga hayotzim mipi hashalit. That a ruler, you've got to be very careful. And the Gemara brings an amazing story in Moed Katan. And they get to the dinim of being comforting people who are suffering, mourners, comforting mourners. It's brought down that Shmuel, when he was one of the great chachamim, went into a brother of his, or a relative of his, in his family, to be menachem over that he was an over after his parents, or whoever it was. He went in to see him, and he said, "Why are you doing kaf for kaf? So, why did you do this and this?" So the mourner got a little bit upset, and he said, "No, and if you were a mourner, you wouldn't do it that way and that way." So in a few weeks' time, all of a sudden, Shmuel lost one of his very close, dear people, and he was sitting available. And when this man who he'd been there came into him, and Shmuel looked at him very angry, and Shmuel said, "Oy, oy, oy." In other words, you shouldn't have said to me such a word, and if you were an over, what would you do? You understand? You must be very careful what you say to people, and the more you, the more you've developed, and the more you're high, the more you have to be careful not to say things that could imply unpleasant or bad results. There'll be people who it doesn't matter who they are. That was a very. And then there's other Gemaras, but the Gemara brings. I push can't go into all the different examples, but there are other Gemaras where the Gemara tells similar stories to that. So the Medrash says that that's what happened with Yaakov. Yaakov was Yaakov. He was the foundation of the whole world. He was an unbelievably great man, and he just said, not knowing because he didn't know that Rachel had done. Had he known that Rachel had done, he would have said those words. But he said it. Fafan. It's lost. As he stated in the matter. What's the feedback come to? But just by the way, I feel it's necessary that we should point out these inyanim. That it's very, very important in all inyanim where you oppose other people and you don't agree with them, or you're even very, very upset with them, and you don't. To what extent these inyanim can come. But you must always be very medactic to talk against the matter concerned, not against the people. And there's a very famous Gemara in the Masechta Brachos. The Gemara tells us that Reb Meir, who was one of the great Tanoim, the really great Tanoim, he lived in a neighborhood where he had a whole lot of what they would call nowadays pushtachim. They call hooligans, tough nuts. Guys that caused trouble in his area. So to the point that it disturbed Reb Meir, being such a holy man, disturbed him very much. So he said to his wife, he said, he said, just take it easy, I'm going to curse these guys. I'm going to curse them and get rid of them. It's very similar that if he deliberately cursed them, then Rahman and Islam. Here, Yaakov Avinu didn't deliberately curse them, yet nonetheless. So his wife said to him, oh no, Reb Meir's wife is a very big lady, she's a very tremendously frum and learned lady. What was her name? Brudia was her name. So she said to Reb Meir, she said, it's written a pasuk, Yitamu chatoim min ha'oretz, that the sins should be cleaned away from the earth. Or not, she said, chatoim v'loi choitim. It's written the sins, but not the sinners. It said the sins should be cleaned away from the world, but not the sinners. That's not your, that's not our. We must never curse anybody. We have to get rid of the bad things, but not the bad people. That's not our Indian. God forbid. That's what she said to Reb Meir, and he was makaber. Reb Meir didn't curse her. And later, I think it's mashma in the Gemara, that later they quietened down or they went away anyway. As they say in Yiddish, they haben sich abgechappert. So from that we see just how tremendously careful we have to be in all inyonim, that you must never, personally imply anything bad or nasty or improper results personally against anybody that you have even the most profound issues with, to the point of, hate. I don't want to use the word sinner. That's a very difficult word. You must be very careful only to pose the issues, of not the people. You must not ever. And therefore, we always notice that whenever the Rebbe spoke, and sometimes the Rebbe was tremendously against inyonim. Terribly so. And yet, nonetheless, the Rebbe never mentioned names. And even when he spoke about people, he only just hinted at who he meant. And you just sometimes, those who were listening had to work out who did he mean, and to try to figure out who was the one that was involved in the scene. Because the Rebbe never said names. And he only spoke always with tremendous sharpness against the issues involved and the matters concerned. But he never implied anything personal against anybody. We're going to have to charge fees. That here we see a very fascinating Indian, that you must be very careful what you say and how you say it, particularly when it involves large issues and large differences with people. And therefore, the Rambam says that one of the things that's going to be when Mashiach will come, he writes over there, the Mashiach will bring that ain't shom loy sinah v'loy tacharus, that there won't be hate and there won't be like competition between people. They won't feel like personal opponents from one to the other. There'll only be certain issues which maybe still need to be fixed, but they will be fixed in a way of darchei noyam v'darchei sholem, ways of peace and ways of proper, pleasant approach. Everything can be and will be, and doubtless shall be settled by even Kotzeh. So that's what the Medrash says, B'negeh to Yaakov Avinu's Ramah. However, it's not as simple as all that, because it comes along the Zohar Kodesh, and the Zohar Kodesh says a most amazing thing also, mind-boggling, in my opinion. And the Zohar Kodesh says that Rachel Imeinu, why was she punished? The Zohar Kodesh doesn't say because Yaakov Avinu, blew it, and he had this. Doubtless, the Zohar Kodesh also brings that into consideration. However, the Zohar Kodesh says that the problem was that Rachel Imeinu, she caused her father tzar. She caused him pain, and by stealing his whatever they were, she caused him pain. And then the Zohar Kodesh says a most amazing thing, that since she caused her father tzar, and therefore she was punished, and very heavily punished, she was punished, avogav de niskavno tav. As it's written in the Aramic, in the Zohar Kodesh, even though she had a good intention. She had a good intention, from the point of view of taking away Avodah Zarah, but since she caused her father a lot of tsar, therefore she was punished. Now that's the most mind-boggling. That's absolutely mind-boggling. That even though she was taking away Avodah Zarah from him, and according to Rashi, and it seems to be more weighty, the opinion that this was Avodah Zarah, as we pointed out, at least as the Maharal prior to that he'd made it into Avodah Zarah. It could be the Ramban's right, it didn't begin with Avodah Zarah, but he bowed down to it, he made it into Avodah Zarah. Nonetheless, we see that the Zohar Kodesh says that she was punished because she was Matzaya, her father. I mean, that's the most amazing, mind-boggling thing. So I got Yitzchak to bring me a sefer. I knew that sefer is made on that Ha'orah, and I couldn't remember what's the Ha'orah. I wanted to look up and see what is the. So there's a Zohar Kodesh which has got all these amazing little observations from a very great Rav. He was from a family of great Mukubolim. They were big Mukubolim, but they were also amazing Bali Nigla. Their name was Magolias. And actually, there was one of that family that was not so long ago, about a generation ago. He was very close with Chabad. He used to come to the Yitzchak when they first founded Chabad. He used to make a big farbrengen on Yitzchak. He used to come to a descendant from that family. He used to come to the Yitzchak farbrengen because they were very close with our Rebbeim. He had letters from the Rebbe, all sorts of amazing inyan. However, this Rav Reuven Magoni, he's got this things alongside the Zohar. He makes these unbelievable kionas. It's just unfathomable. I mean, he must have been a walking computer, but he catches all these little questions, and he sends you here, and he sends you there, and he sends you so on. It's just mind-boggling. He didn't have a computer. I mean, like a woman. So he writes at the side of the Zohar, and he says that it's not so surprising the fact that Rachel Imenu was punished because she was Matzaya, her father. And he sends up to a Rambam. He shows you a Rambam in Hilchos Mamrim. Well, it's in Hilchos Mamrim at the end of, right near the end of the Rambam, in Sefer Shoftim. That's where the Rambam writes all the halachas of Kibud Avayim, of giving honor to your mother and father. So the Rambam brings over there that you have to give koved. You have to show koved and yirah. There's two things by a parent. You have to show honor and fear. Like awe for them. He said that you have to give koved and honor to a father, even if he's a Rosha. That's a very interesting Rambam. All the Meforshim talk about it. Even if he's a Rosha, and the Rambam used some other expression. He's a Rosha or Odom Ra or something like that. He's an improper person, and he can mamish be described as a Rosha. Nonetheless, you're mechuyev to give him koved. And so the Hagos Maimoni over there, he brings a Gemara, Masechta Bava Metzia, which tends to even contradict that. And so the great Meforshim go in to answer the Rambam. How does he get out of that Gemara, Masechta Bava Metzia, which appears not to be that way? And they answer all sorts of terutzim to put the Rambam right. Which means that most of the great Meforshim come out on the Rambam's side that he's right. You have to give koved and fear or to a father, even if he's a Rosha. I feel a Rosha. Some other language I can't think of it. I should have brought it down with me. The Rambam writes of Odom Ra, because I can't remember exactly the expression. So the Fizeh says that the Nitzutze Zohar, that's what he calls his peers on the Zohar. He said that's the Rambam. He said, you see, it's what they, by the liturgists, they say it's a mafudish Rambam. It's an open Rambam. According to him, he said what the Zohar Kodesh says that Rambam was punished, because she should have given honor even to her father if he was a Rosh. She caused him tsar. He was upset. He was broken by the fact he didn't have these getchkes, how they call these little gods, to serve. Nonetheless, she was punished very, very terribly. I mean, it's not stam. So maybe we can suggest that according to the Zohar, she wouldn't have been punished so heavily, and so therefore it's like a joining joining together two factors because of what Yaakov Avinu said, and that also gets the two like together, and that brought to a very severe punishment on Rachel Imeinu. However, from that we see a new inyan in Kibbud Av V'Aim. Now last week we also saw about Esau in reference to Kibbud Av. If you remember, we learned a whole inyan when again to Esau. Here we see another issue of Kibbud Av V'Aim in a oven that you have to show kavod to your parents, no matter who they are and what they are. This doesn't mean you have to follow them. It doesn't mean you have to go and eat what they give you to eat. But you have to at least show a certain kavod. You mustn't do the opposite of kavod. You mustn't do the eipa of kapanim of kavod. So al kapanim we see lefizeh that there's another whole issue here of Kibbud Av from Rachel Gabi Lovo by taking these in Yonah. And yet nonetheless, Rashi tends to back it up. Rashi says that she had a good kavanah, and therefore it's hard to say that Rashi would learn that there's anything wrong here with Kibbud Av, because he said she has a good kavanah, or in passages she does. Therefore it would appear that Rashi would say that her unfortunate punishment was due to Yan. And therefore Rashi goes out of his way to say it was because of what Yaakov Avinu said, this whole idea, like the ruler who has the unmeaning statement, that Rashi learns it more that way, not so much mitzat the koyach of Kibbud Av, according to the Zohar Kodesh, clearly as an inyan from Kibbud Av. However, we have to examine for a minute what is Rashi hinting at. Every brief little thing in Rashi carries with it worlds of significance. But the fact that Rashi goes out of his way to say that she took obviously very risky path of stealing these things from her father. In other words, like we said, maybe monetarily you can drag back and forth that she didn't steal, but she took it without his knowledge, caused him tzar, like the Zohar Kodesh says. So it was a questionable step at the best of things, and therefore the Torah calls it Geneva, Vatiknoy. Nonetheless, Rachel Imeinu had Mesurus Nefesh, for them zah, for that particular inyan. So we have to say that there's hidden in that a very profound message. We see this occurs in different nuances. This message occurs in different nuances in Rashi, and Kama Mekos in his Pirush al Torah, as brought out in the Sichos of the Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach. And that is, we see that our forefathers, right from the very beginning, were devoted to the mitzvah of Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noah. In other words, that they were tremendously devoted to the idea of spreading the word of the Eibishter and the seven mitzvahs which he gave with after the flood to the sons of Noach to right the world and set the world in its right oifan. One of the bases of the whole thing is the Issa of Avodah Zarah. Because if a goy is involved in Avodah Zarah, then he can't be in the right path, that he will be devoted to the Eibishter's will. And how's he supposed to be devoted to the Eibishter's will? To make the world a better place. And therefore, it's brought down. And the Rebbe's got all sich in Parsha Noach in Chelik Tesvav. But the Rebbe Melech Mashiach says that the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach are not like our mitzvahs, that our mitzvahs are to bring Elokus into the world and to make the whole world bottle and kolol in divinity. The mitzvahs of the B'nai Noach are to just put good, order in the world, and to make the world a ready place for that revelation of divinity, that there shouldn't be things which will just make it impossible to understand divinity. And therefore there's an inyan to teach the goyim and to assist them, that they should come to a realization of their Sheva Mitzvahs, and they should be Makayim B'Poel, and they should do them. And one of the bases of that whole thing is to separate the Goyim from Avodah Zarah. That they should realize that the one and only power which runs the world is the power of the Eibishter. And that all things that happen in the world are from Him. And if you only train and you turn your eyes and your mind, you can see that B'Poel. And that was brought down in our Yom Yom, that one of the simple things that we can do to know the Eibishter is to watch Hashgacha Pratis, just to watch in our lives, to watch in the things around us, how things are happening, and you see that something seems to be ruling this whole business. And you see that things are not coincidental, and all these inyonim, and that comes to be a clear recognition on the part of a Yid. That type of inyan has to also be given over to Goyim. They've got to realize that the world runs in a way that the Eibishter runs it, and he shows you that he's running. And there's all sorts of indications, even when he runs it in a way which looks to be according to Teva. And therefore somebody like Lavan, what is pointed out in Siddur, that Lavan was really a Baal Madrach. In certain inyonim, Lavan was a very high revelation. And the Alter Rebbe brings it in Torah, in this week's parasha, that Lavan represents a very high Madrega, a very high Madrega. In Pnimis Advarim, he's very, very high. To the point that everybody asks a question, if Lavan's so high, then we come to that he was such a Dracop. He was only called Lavan Ha'aromi. How come? So the Alter Rebbe has to go out of his way to point over there that was due to this whole Indian of Nefilas and the Tzitzis. There was still certain leftovers from Shviras HaKelim, the Toihu, and that certain very high lights fell, even in the time of the forefathers, from very high Madregas into low Madregas. Lavan was a very high Madrega, and the purity of Lavan is what he is. But and that's why he's called Lavan, because Lavan means white. White means simplicity and purity. But he fell by Derek Nefila into his Amatsu that he was Lavan Ha'arami. So Yesh Loima, that Rachel Imena knew that. She knew that her father was from a very high Madrega, and she knew that their family was shy to very high Madregas in Kedusha. And that's why Yankov came all over with all the Meshuvas Nevi'im, with all the tzaras that Elipaz, Esau's son, chased after him, and all the inyanim that he had, and all the sakonis and all the things that Yankov went through, in order that they should link up with that family. So she knew that there was great Kedusha hidden in that family. And therefore she wanted to be mafresh Lavan for Avodah Zarah. She wanted to stop him. That he shouldn't fall into this tremendous trap of Avodah Zarah. She was Mekayim, this unbelievable mitzvah, a Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noya. And Yesh Loima, that when she was there in the household, and we pointed out before, that when she was there in the household, that she did that to the best of her ability, despite all the unpleasantness that was going on the whole time between her family and her father alone. And when she left, she thought this was the one thing she could do to break him, and maybe it would cause him to wake up, that he wouldn't actually have them. And he would think for a moment, what am I going to do now? Maybe the right thoughts would occur to him. He would be playlish. And if he were to do that, then there's very high things hidden in him. Well, mi yodea, if they won't be miskala, and it'll help the whole world to progress. Like the Rebbe said when they get to Esav, we gave over the last year, that Esav has made progress, but he's not the Esav that he was way back then. And the same with Lavan. Therefore, Rachel Imenu had Mesiras Nefesh, and she meant good, and she was niskaven, lahafrish as avia mi'avodah. And she took on herself all sorts of sakonas, because we see that unfortunately, due to the fact that Yaakov didn't realize that, he didn't realize that she'd done that, then he wanted to show to Lavan just how much he was against another mitzvah from the Sheva mitzvahs being there, and that is to steal, that you don't steal. And that's one of the big problems with the Goyim, that they're very, into this whole Indian of stealing and, gambling and all this sort of stuff, which all come down to the basic Indian of stealing, of Geneva. And evidence, the Torah says that it was a form of a Geneva, even though we can answer all sorts of inyanim, but Derech Halacha, it wasn't mamish Geneva, but the Torah calls it Geneva. And therefore, when Yaakov heard Geneva, when he heard Lama Ganafta, Shelakai, he didn't pay attention it was Avodah Zarah, or what it was. He said, Geneva? He said, that's not by me. He said, in my household, that's not going to be Geneva. And therefore he used a very strong expression. Had he known, then he wouldn't have used that expression. But that's what the Gemara says, that that you've got to be very careful when you're a higher person, that you must always think for a moment and weigh what you are saying, that there can be very heavy outcomes from what was a well-meaning statement, albeit. In other words, everybody meant good. Rachel meant tremendously good, Yaakov meant good, but ultimately speaking. And there was another issue here, that this happened to be her father, and that's the amazing pillar of the whole Indian, what the Rambam brings over there, and in the Nitzot Zeh, he shows up to that Rambam, that first and foremost, if you got a father, you got to be concerned about him. But that comes out according to the Zohar HaKodesh, that you can have in mind Sheva Mitzvah, you can mean all those things in the world, but if it's mamish, your father, then you got to be very careful not to cause him tsar, even albeit he may be a Rasha, and you're not machuyev to listen to what he says, but get to your personal life. If he said to listen here, go there and do that, then it's written clearly. And everybody agrees that you don't have to obey him in that regard. But to cause him suffering, that you've got to be very careful. You shouldn't cause him mamish to suffer and be hurt, except in certain very rare issues and so on and so forth. And therefore it's possible that Rachel Imeinu, we can maybe say B'derech Hefsher, that Rachel Imeinu knew about that. She knew that she was causing tzar to Lavan. She knew he would have tzar, and therefore she wasn't surprised when he came running around and he was almost panic-stricken, looking for these trophies all over the place. She realized that, but she felt it was so important to turn the world away from Vayietze that was worth taking that chance with the union of Kibbutz Avei. And maybe, to a certain extent, she knew that she was playing with fire. But it could be and then it would be Mamish Mesilas Nefesh on the part of Rachel Imeinu. It could be that, like we said before, the two issues joined together. First of all, the curse of Yaakov and the union of the fact that she put him to tsar. The two things, put her father to tsar, the two things together led to such a serious outcome. But one way or another, we see how tremendously careful and nizhar one needs to be when it comes to the union of Kibbutz Avei. From this we see, from this whole union, that Side Ramban, everybody hold that to save the world from Vayietze is a Indian Ikari Vayietze. It's a tremendously important issue, to the point that Rachel Imeinu took personal risk on herself, a very major sort, in order to do so. The great leader and the one leader of our whole generation, the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach, who took on himself to bring this message to the world, is the Rebbe. And this is what we call the Mitzvah of Sheva Mitzvahs, B'nai Noach, and we can see just how important it is to train the Goyim not to think in the way of Vayietze. And that can be in all sorts of ways. It doesn't necessarily mean, because according to the Ramban, it was a relatively harmless thing, basically. But if you get too involved and you get to the point where you bow down to it and you get it really guiding your life, so then you get yourself into big trouble. And according to the Ramban, a lot of the things that the Goyim claim that they're not all that involved in, who knows where it eventually leads to, and in what sort of dictatorship does eventually become in their lives, that they become a form, it becomes a form of Vayietze Zorah, to the point that it becomes a dictating influence in their life. And it could even be that type of thing can Rahman in Islam, even Rabbi von Yid. Is it that far? we see that the tremendous issue that the Rebbe took on himself to spread the word of good conduct, positive conduct, how do you call it, contributory conduct to the world. Well, that's the basic theme of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. That's what the Rebbe says in that famous Sikha, that Goyim have to be devoted to the proper building of an ordered and world which is devoted to higher issues, and therefore the Rebbe brings an interesting thing over there, that they also are required to give charity. Not everybody holds that, but there's a Ram, in Masechet Vayietze with the Ram, writes over there that Goyim are mechuyev to give tzedakah, and the Rebbe goes into the whole thing over there, why it's good to urge Goyim even to give charity, because that builds the world and brings the whole interrelation of one person who has to relate to the needy. That's one of the big positive buildings of an ordered society, where the people who have care for those who are needy. At the basis of it all is lahafrish me'avedazorah, and therefore the Rashi brings that she did the whole thing with great risk to herself. Lahafrish esavia me'avedazorah. But again, it's really a strange world that we live in, and the Eibishter is showing so many different things, and it's brought down in the Rambam, in Hilchos Tainis and in other places, that we are mechuyev, not, God forbid, to look at the heavens and run after the heavenly bodies, but we are commanded to lift up our eyes and look at things which happen in the world, and to say, oh, why did this happen? To ask ourselves as human beings and as Yidden, to ask ourselves, why did this thing happen? There must be some Indian why this. If we're going to say that every little prat, even if one leaf blows from one street or one side of the street to the other, according to the Baal Shem Tov, or according to the Rebbe Elimelech Milizhansky, if a horse drives into a public street in a little shtetl and stops and does something on the floor, that's also a hashgacha pratis. As that's gesagt to das ist hashgacha. Aber mehr kommt da ist, der everything's hashgacha pratis is how much more so big things, where it's just cute. They were saying, look at what is happening. You can't see it. Where are you guys? It's a commandment that we should look at these things. And as it's written in the Rambam and other great Rishonim, that's part of our avodah, not to, God forbid, run after the heavenly body, but to look at things which are happening, bein b'shomayim, or bein ba'oretz, and to learn from them, and to see from that what we can take out in being mevatla v'edazorah from the world. And Mamela bringing the right message to the right people, including the Goyim and the Umas Ha'olam. And therefore, it's a pity by me, I can't understand it, that we see amazing things which have happened just in our time, and just in recent months, and in recent weeks, and in recent years, which are just so stick out, and they're just so boiled to the point of being mind-boggling. They stick out, and yet nobody really says anything. And how much more so the Frum Olam is missed an amazing opportunity to bring a message to the world, and nobody seems to be saying anything. I mean, there are few people maybe here and there. And I found a Frum journal, not from Chassidim. The other week my wife showed me a journal given out by Frumas, not Chassidim. They just said that all sorts of unusual things that are happening negatively in different parts of the world, and that's all. But they didn't. They should have written a huge, maskara from that. And Zim came, kaf. Oh, they said no. A lot of unpleasant things are going on in this part of the world, this part of the world, this part, and they left it at that. I was just mind-boggled. He had the most golden opportunity to go a bit further. Gave up. So I mean, look at what. I'll just give you one example. I mean, so the American president sent over this representative of his, but she belongs to the other sections. They say she's not even a male. Send her over to pray around. With all honor to the females, I don't mean any pagir in anybody's cover. But for sure, women are not meant, just like they're not meant to be drivers. They're not meant I don't drive in a car anymore, but I know that they're not meant to be drivers. They're not meant to be. They're not meant to be international international politicians. Most of the men are not meant to be as halachic covered the women. So anyway, she drayed around him for quite a few days, trying to dray everybody a cup. And unfortunately, she didn't really need to dray the Yidden a cup, because they've already been drayed by the Yidden. They didn't need her to dray them up. They have to give everything to the Goyim, etc., etc., etc. But she went around strutting me and pushing. You have to give everything away, including Yerushalayim, and gets back to America. She's there a day or two. One of the worst fires in human history, and probably the worst fire in American history, burnt for days in the west coast of the United States, and something like 1 million people were put out of their homes, at least temporarily, from one fire. You know what that is? 1 million mentioned to suffer. A huge amount of people. That's a huge amount of homes, and a huge amount of buildings were just consumed by this unbelievable fire. What on earth is that? I mean, there's never been. My wife spoke to an elderly uncle that lives over in that part of America, and he said there's never been a fire like that. Like to the door. As a matter of this is a boilet. This pasuk is saying, please dash me and learn from me what you're supposed to learn. That's what Rashi says right at the beginning of the Torah. On the second pasuk, Rashi says, so it is with other inyanim. And what do we need even better? That right here now, right in our backyard, right in our front yard. We're living now in the month of Kislev. Well, it's supposed to, but according to all the days, it's supposed to, according to the Gemara and the Mishnah and the Zohar, everything says that it's supposed to be winter now, and there's supposed to be rain in Eretz HaKodesh, and a lot of it. And if you go back a few years, everybody by this time was already using their heating instruments in their houses, not their air conditioners to cool the place down. And I just came from my office, I was using my air conditioner here with me. And I'm not the sort of person that I'm given to that type of thing. It's just not naturally hot for this time of the year, and there's not been one drop of rain. There was about 3 drops the other day. Oh, but the Gabbard rain that we need, that's not even considered one drop. It's not even a half a drop. It's like they say in Yiddish, it's a glatt gornished. It's just nothing. I mean, what could be, it's just boiling. And so even my taxi driver, people are saying, you know, it's the TV, it's not natural. But the sky should be blue like this every night when the sun goes down, it's all red and hot. What that means, that's what I was taught when I was in the army, that the next day is going to be hot. You just see no end to it. And I asked the taxi driver today, what do they say on the radio? And they said they just don't know, they don't see any end to it, it's just going to drag on. I'm in the middle of the Chodesh Kislev. But the Mishnah says clearly in Masechta Taanis that if you pass Rosh Chodesh Kislev and there's been no rain, then the Beis Din has to be goyis the tiniest tzibah, or kol tzibah, you have to fast. And pray all sorts of special prayers, and read all sorts of things in the Sefer Torah, all sorts of amazing things. So I can understand why they don't do that nowadays. They don't want people fasting. It's hard to ask people to fast any more than what they have to. So you can't, but at least say that there will be special prayers. People should come out in public and pray and say to him. It's just absolutely mind-bogglingly unnatural, the whole situation. So why is that? What every day in Kriyat Shema you say the answer every day. What all from Yidden and even some Yidden are not from read Kriyat Shema at least once a day. I mean, we read it 3, maybe 4 times a day. You say Krishma Shalamita, you say Krishma here. Before davening, you say Krishma mitten davening, you say Krishma Maita. You say Krishma I don't know how many times a day. It's well known that there was nothing poke fun at the Chassidim how many times Christmas, before Christmas, you know. But what are you saying, Christmas? That if it won't be the way the Abishter wants it, there won't be any rain. Money in time, that stays clear. I have to have a clear word. So he reads all this. Why doesn't he look at the sky and say, what's going on? And that's Poshet Lahafrish Es atzmeinu mi Avodah Zarah. We should get away from this whole Avodah Zarah business. With what does Avodah Zarah say? Oh, the world just runs itself. What runs anything? All these crazy other inyanim, they're the ones that run. That's Emes Avodah Zarah. I remember Rochel Imeinu, she had Mesirus Nefesh lahafrish Aviyah, when he was into her. And she had Mesirus Nefesh to the point that we see there was Mamish Mesirus Nefesh. Mamish. Lahafrish Aviyah me Avodah Zarah, and to take away Avodah. And therefore I saw one of the Meforshim Mamish, just before I came down, one of the great Meforshim said that all the things that the fathers did were also Me'ein Liyosid Lover. That we say every day in Aleinu, Lahaviyah Gilulim Min Ha'oref, to get rid of the Avodah Zarah, that's Moshiach. And so he writes that Rachel Imeinu was already looking towards Moshiach. She wanted to prepare the world to fill the Yemel. That's well known. That Yaakov Avinu, he was into that. Yaakov Avinu said, we want Moshiach now. It's written in Ein Beit, and all the great Jerusalem and the Rabbi. That's it, guys. We've got to wake up and spread the good word. Talk to people. Doesn't matter who they are. Wherever you meet them, you must talk. You must be lahafrish or oilam mi'avodah zarah. And we have to tell people the emes and genuine story. And we've got to know that the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noah, that is the answer. And that's what's going to save the world. And that's why Melech HaMashiach said it's going to save the world. And Rabbeinu Shalom, we should open our eyes, like the Rebbe said. And it's not Mishachism and not Mishachism. It's not you're a Mishachist or you're not a Mishachist. You've got to just open your eyes. And you see the rulings of Melech HaMashiach. And you see the guidance of Melech HaMashiach in the whole world. Don't have to be a favorite Mishachist. You just have to be fair. Just look at the world and draw your right conclusions. And I'm going to say a prayer for rain. I know what the crazy weatherman or whatever they call them, they say that there's not going to be rain for like X weeks. That's only what they say. But if we say the right things to the Eibishter, we can be boiled that there'll be rain in a few hours or a few minutes, I feel.
Was it once a story that for a really long period there wasn't out?
There
was once, I think in Israel, that there was a long period that there wasn't rain, and they all went to the Kotel.
Exactly.
And there was rebels.
Exactly. Yeah, there's many stories like that. They went to Yerushalayim HaKodesh also once.
Right.
To Yerushalayim HaKodesh. And they prayed. Yes, you're right. And I remember that's what, we've got to go back to the old-fashioned way of doing things. We live in this computerized world, we forget what we say at Kriyat Shema. And Hashem should help us. Take it from Yad. First of all, there should be rain, and then there should be over Beikah. There should be Yiskalas Melech HaMashiach. Take it from Yad. And we should, in a good way and in a happy way, be Mafrishas O'ilam, Me'avodah Zarah, and to bring down the Gila of Elokus into an ordered and good world. Amen.